The self narrative that you're talking and telling your story all day long to yourself. What are you saying? What story are you telling yourself all day? Because now, if you're telling a story and you don't like what you're seeing around your world, it's the story you're telling and you're attracting it. So change your story and watch your world change.
Do you have a story to tell? And do you know how to tell your story? I have the author, Melissa Reeves, of the Storyteller's Mind movie. We're going to find out what that it means. Anyway, it's all about storytelling. Melissa, take it away and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Maureen. It's great to be here. I can't wait to have a conversation with you. I mean, you're wonderful. So, hi.
I'll take that. Thank you. Congratulations on being an international bestseller. And okay, this Storyteller's Mind movie. First of all, it's telling your story.
Mhm.
Why is that important? And what does it take to be a really great storyteller? Right into it.
Great question. Well, it's this is actually a business book. This was written for executives and founders and rising stars because I had been growing up in corporate America. I was in enterprise sales, and I know what we did to clients and customers. We drowned them in data, we bored them, we confused them, and I was a top seller. So I somehow did it better as far as storytelling when we were trying to do case studies, to prove your worth. And I had also been in enterprise sales for a long time in technology, ad technology and data. And I just started burning out.
Yeah.
And we finally got myself fired. It was so clear that I wasn't in this work. And I had to go through that self-reflection stage. Like, what is it now? I'm 53 years old at the time. I'm like, what am I going to do? No one's going to hire me now. I'm everyone's mom. They're like, what am I going to do? And I started writing down all the things that I do enjoy about business, and storytelling was in there, right? It was in there. But most people are really not good at it. They're taking slides and they're data dumping all over them. They're going right away with graphs and data and numbers. And I realized that those aren't what are going to make you sell. Those aren't going to be what makes you connect to your audience, right? It's the stories. It's not chart. It's the story that the chart is telling you. And so I was like, that's it. I'm gonna start my own company. I'm gonna become an a mentor to executives, and I'm gonna teach them how to become amazing storytellers. Because I actually go out on stages like the Moth, and I tell stories, and I've won quite a few awards. So I thought, well, why can't I take what I'm doing and bring it to the boardroom? So that's where I started teaching workshops on how do you become a great storyteller in business, right? So it took off. I mean, right away, people were just clamoring to get into my workshops. Then I started looking at corporate levels like Microsoft and Broadcom, like, 'cause it's easier, really, to be honest. You can sell one client and they bring you 50 people. Instead of me selling 50 tickets to my public workshop, it was much, much easier. And I could swoop in and help more people at once on how do you tell a case story? It's not the number, and it's not even the client. It's a human being. Let's see the human being. Let's hear, smell, taste, touch what's going on in that story that you're telling us about your company being the hero of the story. And so the Storyteller's Mind movie is a book that's designed for the business audience, but anyone can read it. Anyone can. It's applicable to everything, but it definitely has that leaning towards business. And the reason why I call it a mind movie is that when you're really vivid and clear and the listener can see it, they can hold on to it in their imaginations. Because I say that a presenter is a storyteller, and you literally have your audience's imagination in your hands. So don't blow it. Enjoy it. Take over. Let them escape into your story so that you are captivating and compelling. And when we can see it and we can hear it and smell it and taste it and touch it, that's the mind movie. And so I'm actually saying that this isn't just storytelling teaching. This is actually using all of your tools as a human being and a communicator to really drive your message home. So that's what it's called that.
And also it becomes from charts and slides and data to the human element, and it becomes fun.
Big time.
Okay, okay. Now why the, and I'm still getting, we're unreeling this, the reference there, but the mind movie, does that mean, or are you saying that you wanted to have that actually is the story is so vivid it creates a mind movie?
That's right. So
Ah.
here's I use a lot of examples. So and they're throughout the book. So the book actually has about 20 executives sharing their own stories. And I break down like, let's find your story first, right? And then I'll give a prompt. Like tell me a time when you were resilient. And
Mm.
the first thing that comes up, the client starts writing something down. And then that's pretty rough story at the first. They're just pretty general. It's meandering all over the place because they're kind of remembering it in pieces.
And that's good, that's how writing starts, right?
That's how it starts.
Right.
That's how it starts. And then that's when my company Story Fruition comes in is we're like, okay, there you go. There's your little zygote party. It's a tiny little thing that's holding on. Now we're going to help you craft it. We're going to start finding the details. So when you said the client, tell me who she is. What did she look like? What was your impression of her? What did her office look like? And so what we're doing is we are setting the scene. And then we'll be like, were you friendly with each other or were you tense? And so we're trying to find the feeling of it. So then when we play the story back, um, the woman will be very clearly seen. We will know the relationship between the storyteller and that particular client. And then we get the storyteller to make that character talk. So we infuse dialogue, instead of them saying something like, and then the client was very angry at us and said that we needed to hurry up. She was running out of time. It would go, listen, I'm running out of time. So you guys better get your stuff together. Right. And so now that's how we're telling the story in a mind movie versus just a regular story that most people would do. We want to edutain you,
You animate it.
animate it. Yeah.
You- you-
Yeah. And everyone can do it, but no one realizes that they can until they start to read it. So this book it really has been designed to change, disrupt the way that business presentations are done. I mean, I've had women in this that wanted to be in the C-suite take my work, apply it, and get the promotion. Because they are taking their slides and not only are they telling the stories really dynamically now, but they're also controlling the way that the slides are being consumed by the audience. So instead of data dumping, we will take a slide and we will actually maybe animate it into 4 different sections so that the listener and the viewer can absorb that information, you know, step by step, right? Not all at once, because when I see most presenters kind of fall off, I say keeping the train on the tracks or derailing it. And that's usually when most presenters derail, is that they think that everything they've ever learned on their journey about this presentation needs to be on one slide. And it just doesn't. In fact, many story fruition presentations, you rarely, really, really, very, yeah, I can say it. You rarely see a chart. We'll put the numbers inside the narrative
So
because
you're
the chart's going to interrupt the flow of the listener a little bit more than they
TED
think.
Talk to corporate,
Say again?
bringing TED Talk to corporate.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
I
Yeah.
love that. Um, and
And nonprofits too. Nonprofits are just aching to be good storytellers and they need to be great storytellers. And I'm actually speaking at the Nonprofit Conference of Washington next week. And I'm very excited by it because they rely on their stories. And I'm still shocked at how many open up with a graph.
oh, you talk about that. It's all about the story with nonprofit.
It's all about the story. So instead of saying 70% of all homeless people that we found this year were destitute, okay, well, yeah, duh. But it's like, why don't you tell us the story of Lenny
Or
and
Bill.
tell us, or
Bill.
Bill, or Sarah? and her dog, like let's hear that and then say, and Sarah represents 70% of the destitute homeless that we found. So now we've got like feelings for this person and her plight. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's that many. I mean, she can fill up Sarah, those many Sarahs could fill up, a stadium. That many people are in that much trouble. Now, what happens is the listeners' oxytocin's flowing in their heads and their bodies, and they're emotional now. And when you're telling an oxytocin story like that, that opens your heart and that opens the wallet.
Okay, so I know this is, we're going to stand a little bit in the world of transformation, but it goes from doing to your being the story
Yeah.
and evoking emotions, and you're living, feeling it, and bringing that forward for other. That simple shift.
Yeah. In storytelling, so people who do like moth storytelling, the stuff that you hear on NPR, their personal stories, the number one rule, if there is any, well, there are quite a few actually, is show us, don't just tell us. Right. And so in that earlier example, when I got the character to talk, that was me showing you versus not just telling you that she was angry. Right. And so the book goes into that quite a bit. So I've broken it down into processes so that it's easy because many, many people, I'm lucky that I was an actor since I was basically 6 years old, but definitely by 9, I was on stages. And so I was trained to always think about the audience. That's what actors do. They're just completely focused on what they're doing with their audience, right? At every scene. And so most people though in business, many of my clients are like, data analysts, CFOs, CEOs. They were STEM students, right? Like,
Operating systems. They're
yeah,
not.
just different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That,
So I give them so much grace and I'm so proud of them when they realize I think I can be better at this. And it's like, you can. And I'm proud of you for stepping forward. So get the book, get started, get coaching. I mean, there's a million ways that we can help someone really shine. And I got to say, it's the most rewarding work I've ever had. Like the best thing that ever happened to me was getting fired. It
okay,
was the
so
best thing.
everything that we do on this show, we bring people forward. So
Hmm.
people are saying, and I love that you said that there was a woman that wanted to get to the C-suite, and by
Hmm.
being able to bring forward her communication skills,
Yeah.
the storytelling, boom, she landed. So she landed in the job that she wanted.
Yes.
People out there, I'm gonna go with three because I love three. Um, that very succinctly, three things right now people can do for their, how to turn what they're doing and it's not landing. Three tips for storytelling.
Okay. One, start gathering your stories and realize that you are a walking storybook. That if you can just start to write down stories like, when were you resilient? When were you a hero? When did you have to face a difficult situation and you didn't think you could do it, but you did? Like just start to think about those things and write them down. And then start telling it. Start telling it, but telling it more vividly, right? So the book would teach you that, right? Like who are the characters? What are your relationships to those people? Learn how to control how many characters are in your story too. And here's a really big one. Learn how to weed whack. Meaning that if your story, I had a very sweet friend of mine tell me a story that he's working on, and it took him 25 minutes to tell me this story.
Mm.
And what we were doing was we were realizing he was sidetracking over and over and over again. He was like telling one story and then he'd go over in here and tell me another story. He'd tell me the history of something. And it was like, and as a storytelling coach, I knew what was happening. I was like, we got to weed whack that. So when I played back his story, I did it in probably 3.5, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And he could see it. I mean, he high fived me when I was done. So, anyways, so I guess it's like find your stories, start to craft them and tell them. And then when you know you're going too long, learn where can you cut it? What's not important? What's not moving and serving your story? Like, I don't need to know the history, or please don't try to teach me your science. I'm not a scientist, but show me your mission. Tell me your story of what you're trying to save and be succinct, right? Because that's going to keep our very short attention spans on you. when someone starts to meander and go really, really long, or they start going into another story, what happens is the audience is confused. They're like, I don't know where we are now. And then you can frustrate people. So it's really an essential business skill,
And
period.
I'm thinking I'm ready to, so also when you're talking to anyone, that window of opportunity
Mhm.
is shrinking. So it used to be a 20-minute interview, then it used to be 5 minutes. Now we're down to, and I'm talking in the video world, right? In content, you have 20 seconds. I think it's even less than that. I think it might be like 7 seconds they're on or off and deciding whether they're going to listen anymore. You
Oh,
get, yeah,
it's 6 seconds for a person on a stage. So when they step on a stage, everyone, those first 6 seconds are so important. And that's where most people blow it. And I'll tell you why. So when a speaker is introduced, there is this precious moment between the audience and that speaker. There's like a tension. There's like a, what are they going to say? And all of my clients that we get them to go right into their story. We don't have them go, well, thank you so much, everyone. It's so great to be here. Is everyone having a good time? All right, okay. Pah, pah, pah. What
oh,
they just did was they just diminished that beautiful moment because now everyone's going, yeah, we're good. Let's get going.
right.
Yes, we are in the audience, or they'll say, hey, let me ask you a question, or shut your eyes. Don't make us shut our eyes. Okay. Like, don't make us shut our eyes. I'm always like, are you going to rob me? And I don't really want to answer a bunch of questions at the beginning either, but maybe later I will because you've won me over, but win me over.
Well, there's trust too. You're establishing trust.
Exactly, exactly. So storytelling and presenters, what we're teaching them is how to own the room, how
Mhm.
to own it from the second they're introduced until they step off. And when they step off the stage of any sort, and I call stage Zoom, Zoom's a stage, okay?
Life is
It's
a
a
stage.
stage. Life is a stage. You can be at a cocktail party and meeting someone who might be a potential investor in your company. And they're like, well, wait a second. Now, how did you get into this? You know, have a short story that tells them why you're doing your why. Because people don't buy, as Simon Sinek said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so your why story is important. It's vital, especially if you're a nonprofit or a startup, because you're competing against things that have already taken off. But that's why I love entrepreneurs, is because they are looking at the world differently. They're seeing an opportunity to change something for the better. And when they do it, it's so exciting. I mean, there's nothing in the world that didn't start off with an entrepreneur thinking it up first.
Well, and there, being an entrepreneur is a gift and a curse
Mm,
because the drum, it's just a different beat. But yeah, and I'm speaking to all entrepreneurs out there or want to be entrepreneurs. Listen to your heartbeat. Go for it and tell.
right. I have a recurring character in my book called my it's gut instinct. And gut instinct talks to me throughout the whole book. And I'm like, because you're right. You're absolutely right. Because we can chatter, the self narrative, let's talk that. The self narrative that you're talking and telling your story all day long to yourself. What are you saying? What story are you telling yourself all day? Because now, if you're telling a story and you don't like what you're seeing around your world, it's the story you're telling and you're attracting it. So change your story and watch your world change.
Oh,
It's a little deep, but I really believe it's true because I could have talked myself out of starting Story Fruition. I could have talked myself out of the book, but instead I was just like, I felt like I was being led.
you were led. The universe led you.
It totally did. Of course it did. Yes. And it still does. And I love
So
it.
on that, with the
Hmm.
and we're just so in sync that for people in their lives, communication is everything, and landing and people understanding it, particularly with text and other ways how much we're so misunderstood
Yeah.
when it comes to being able to tell your story, embrace your story, right? That's that other voice, right? Truly owning who and what you are. Where do they get to apply this in their lives?
everywhere.
And what does that look like?
That's Well, it's interesting because like once I learned really how powerful I was when I was in storytelling mode, and then I realized that I had the audience's imagination in my hands and that I had an obligation to make sure I was honoring it, it was game changing completely. I mean, I apply it all day long. Like, I'll be telling stories vividly with you right now. I'll be capturing mind movie moments that you say something. Um, I'm a lot more fun on dates. Tell me about yourself. I'm like, where shall I begin? Yeah. And then I love hearing other people obviously tell their stories because that's what my business is. I help you tell your story. And when you say story, there's more than one. There's thousands. There's thousands of stories. And I got into the book. I was being led one day as far as writing. It was like the keyboard took off and I started writing life chapters. So like things that happen in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. And as you get older and older and older, you're picking up more stories and wisdom. But there's every little life chapter, right? There's like coming out of college and faking it till you make it. You know, what was that for you? What was it like when you got your first apartment? How good were you with money? And you can formulate that story so that when you're turning around as a parent, I can tell that story to my kids. The day that I walked up to the money machine and nothing came out. And I didn't understand what had happened. There had always been money when I was in college because my generous father helped me. But when I went out on my own, I did not know how to budget. And so I tell that story to my daughter and my son, that, it's all on you. Don't go up to the money machine and expect miracles if you haven't been responsible. So, anyways.
So, okay, Melissa,
Yes.
how can people get in touch with you? And what does it look like to work with you?
Well, it was a great question. So it's not just corporate. So we do work with nonprofits, okay, and I work with a lot of founders. So I started off with helping with pitch decks. That's where it started at Seattle University. Was I was helping people use storytelling to pitch their idea. Okay,
How
so
lined up is that?
it's so fun. Yeah, that's where I started, and then it grew into helping executives with bigger pitches, right? Like I had my first client called me and said, I am ready for Andreessen Horowitz, but my presentation has absolutely no heart in it. Can you please help me? And I went in, and for 6 months, we found case stories, and he infused those into his pitch. And he walked away with a Series A of $35 million. And he was like, we had him. Like, we just had him. So those are rising stars. Those are founders. Those are CEOs, but nonprofit executive directors, entrepreneurs who are pitching their idea, as well as recruiters. I mean, if people are recruiting, they need to be able to start to pull up stories that will attract talent. So, some of the things that we do is we do workshops that teach the core elements of storytelling that then moves into masterminds where people will be in smaller pods and they're applying the story fruition mind movie method, hands on, so that they really start to get how to do it. And then we capture that story in a storyboard that they can put into their story library. Because companies, including nonprofits, they're all telling similar stories, but you want to make sure everyone's got their core stories down because they represent the brand, the organization, et cetera. So those are kind of the key things that we're doing with companies. Individuals, though, I work with to help them not just sometimes with their pitch, but they're going on podcasts and they want to have a library of personal stories that when the podcast person asks them, so how did you get into this? They can answer it with a very interesting story, and so they become storytellers as guests. Um, and those are probably, oh, and then also, if you are interested in doing a keynote, there's a lot of people who are ready to spread their wealth of wisdom and teach something, right? And so they want to do a workshop, they want to do a seminar, or they want to step on an orange dot or a red dot with a microphone and do a TED talk. We will help you find those stories and craft them so that your entire presentation is fantastic and it's just storytelling all the way through, but you're stopping to do your key points of interest for them and be able to summarize in a business way what's going to make them be able to change their lives.
Yeah, I love, so one last question. With corporations that have embodied this, right? So have you found the culture's changed in the company as well by
Yes.
owning their story and knowing who they are?
Yes, yes. I mean, masterminds are really fantastic because what happens is that the leadership is now infusing storytelling into the culture. And now you have, because when you've got people who are telling great stories, they're listening to great stories too. What happens is that the environment of that organization lifts, it comes up. And that means people want to work for you and they want to stick around because the grass isn't always greener. And when you're working in an organization where they're listening to you, they're communicating back to you vividly and and they're shining spotlights on people who have done really well in their town halls by telling stories. It increases retention, productivity, and innovation. It's a fact.
I love that so much. Okay, again, Melissa Reeves, the
Yes.
Storyteller's Mind movie. Links
Hmm.
are below. And thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight and I'm thrilled. And hey, everyone, tell your stories and tell them well.
Tell your
Thank you.
tell your story, because only you can tell your story.
That's right.
Till next time.